just off the top of my head. And then there's a long laundry list of other just things that every app needs, but isn't built into the web framework.
I feel like the web spec people are actually I feel like they are trying to move the right way and they are doing a decent job. It's just, it's all driven by industry needs, right? Like it's driven by the needs of like Microsoft and Google and Apple and these companies that are building the browser. So the people that are working on those specs are generally, but they're building like a small piece and then they build another small piece. It's really apparent in style sheets. Actually, you look at the CSS standard and they'll add a small thing, add a small thing, add a small thing, and then all of a sudden they're able to add like, anchor positioning, right? Like something big that people have been asking for a while.
On this episode of Modern Web, hosts Tracy Lee, Ben Lesh, Adam Rackis, and guest JLarky share their takes on the JavaScript ecosystem, including thoughts on React version transitions and TypeScript compatibility. They also explore the challenges of library updates, as well as web standards and the complexities within standards bodies.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Modern Web Podcast. My name's Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet and on LinkedIn at Tracy S. Lee. I always forget that, but Adam reminded me because he was giving me crap about being on LinkedIn.
You're the only one.
I'm the only one on LinkedIn?
Well, the only one in the tech Twitter bubble that's on LinkedIn.
It's true.
Normies are on there.
I'm here with my co-host, Ben Lesh. Hi, Ben.
Hello, how are you?
If you're not watching this, there is a YouTube link as well. You can find us on YouTube and you can see Ben's amazing shirt.
My daughter.
What does it say? If you ain't first.
You ain't first, you're last.
Yeah.
It's a movie quote.
You can follow Twitter on Ben Lesh. You can follow Ben Lesh on Twitter at Ben Lesh. And then we're here with Adam Rackis. You can follow Adam on Twitter also at Adam Rackis. Hey, Adam.
Hello.
Cool. Awesome. And then we have a guest today. So Yaroslav / JLarky, or however you know him, wherever you know him from, we're excited to have you on.
Yes. Hello. As soon as you started this like new format, I was like, I should get there somehow.
Yeah.
Glad it happened.
This new format of just hanging out. We've just been hanging out for a little bit. Yeah. So what's on everyone's mind today?
Well, a lot of things kind of like happened over the last week. Again, like some of them like smaller ones, so like maybe like not everyone knows, but like I'm excited about is like volleyball like new version or something like that. But also like some pretty important things happened, right? Like all the React news or Solid Start 1.0. So.
Oh yeah, I was so excited to see. Was that yesterday that they tweeted that Solid Start 1.0?
Yeah, I think so.
Finally here. Yeah. And then what I think the next conference is next conference is tomorrow, is it? Is that right? So
I don't know.
Nobody's going.
Looks like.
Are we not lovers of Next?
I'm liker of Next.
A liker of Next?
I'm a distant observer of Next.
What about you, JLarky?
Well, I looked at the Next source code. So like I had to start a lot of like very small projects just to see how Next does something when I was like looking into like RC, because like I started looking into RC where RC meant Next.js. There was like nothing kind of like about it. Like the only reference that we had was like that Notes app from like 2 years prior. And that one had like .server, .client, and all that stuff. Like it wasn't like a real RC framework. So I used to have a website on Next 5 years ago. So that's the extent.
Ben and I, we did this little project, and we used v0.dev, but then we like ripped out all the Next stuff, not on purpose. I wish we had, but I mean, we're trying to do it like not in a Next app, which I feel like defeats the purpose of v0.dev. Do you think they'll ever make v0.dev like not Next specific? Probably not.
Is it Next specific? I think it's just React specific.
No, it generates Next components.
Well, what does that mean?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever going to be framework agnostic. I would be surprised.
So like when v0.dev, it generates like whatever app you want it to. When it does the scaffolding, like it'll like within the code, it's generating next components for you.
React components, but yeah.
Yeah, React next components.
Well,
uses
yeah, it's
Tailwind, though.
generating React components that are using a library that's specific to Next. Like,
Yeah,
that's
there we go.
Which
But
library?
I don't even know. Like, it's presumably part of some Next framework. Like, it's just as like, oh, I'm importing slider component or whatever the hell, and this will work.
It uses ShadCN and Tailwind. Those aren't Next specific. Those are React.
Oh, that's right. It is using. Never mind. It is using Shed. So we could have copied that in. Like it's. I forgot that their whole paradigm is just copy the component to your thing. Like you don't install it. So
we didn't have to rip it all out.
No, I mean we didn't rip anything out. All I did is just had ChatGPT or Copilot stub in the components for us, and it worked just fine. Like it took a minute.
And it uses Tailwind, so it's not terrible to convert that to other frameworks like Svelte or Vue or whatever you want to use.
Right.
The ShadCN part might be tricky, but
yeah, we haven't said the word Tailwind in a while, so like nobody cares about Tailwind anymore. Everybody's like default. Yeah, everyone just uses it, right? That's the thing.
In like the next few years, no one's gonna even know if they're using Tailwind or plain CSS. They're just gonna be like Copilot, do whatever, and it'll and then it'll be like, no, make it more yummy. It'll start like knowing how like designers talk.
Yeah, make it more yummy. That's something I would say. I told somebody that today. Make it more, That's what I said. Make it more,
more,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was like, I was like, is that enough context for you? Yeah.
Yeah, as long as the response to you was like a Scarlett Johansson voice, we're fine.
Right.
What is that all about? This chat, OpenAI saying that they're not going to use Scarlett Johansson's voice anymore, even though it's not Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah.
But like, why did they rip it out then? Because it is Scarlett Johansson.
I think it was a really lame attempt by Sam Altman to get a date with Scarlett Johansson. Like he just forgot she was married or something. But that's what I think. Like typical awkward nerd talks to pretty girl. That's what I think the entire thing was about.
Well, a lot of people like, who's that? One of those supermodels. Is it Miranda Kerr? I think she's like married to some tech guy. I mean, that's just such a thing these days, right? Like, what's the Reddit founder's name again? Married to Serena.
I don't care.
Alexis married to Serena.
It's probably something.
So basically, if you're in tech and you make it, you're going to marry a supermodel. Like that's Serena's not a supermodel, but you're going to marry someone famous. Is that everyone's fine? That's why everybody here is in tech.
Yeah.
Thing.
That doesn't sound superficial at all. I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah. Well, okay. So JLarky, saw your tweet. I don't know what to call you. Yaroslav JLarky. It's so weird. Like, it's weird to like, you could call me Lady Lead, I guess. We can call Ben Lesh, and Adam Rackis. We'll just go by all our Twitter handles today. But I saw you using React 19. Has anybody else used React 19? What was that like?
I guess just to speak of like my other names, I also have like a parasocial fix account where I do kind of like my streaming, and I did a stream recently about like like trying out React 19, trying it out in like Remix and Astro, and just like seeing it.
Where's that?
Like, where's what?
Where's the stream?
I will type it up in a meanwhile.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, and like the real app, that one I didn't stream. That was real app. So I would say so far, the biggest issue that I had, because I was playing just kind of like surface level, was like in TypeScript, because they changed types a bit, and it's kind of like incompatible. Like they're doing the right thing, but like major version, something breaking, you have to like update your code and all that stuff. So like types changed, and what it ended up doing is that if you're using a library and they didn't update their types, like it's not going to compile on your end. So this is like one of those. Is like, hey, is this library even maintained yet? You're not supporting React 19 types. So it's like that's kind of like the downside that like I noticed right away. Again, like on the smaller apps, it just worked. Like all the new APIs, they're like new. So like as long as you're not using them, it's just like exactly like compatible with 18. Which is like true, I guess, for like 17 to 18 transition as well. But like in 18, they were saying, well, actually, you have to use like this, like create root instead of like whatever it was called before, render. You have to use like hydrate root instead of all that. So like this 17 to 19 was like a kind of like a bigger jump. 18 to 19, in my experience so far, the only issues that I saw was that with types. And again, if you're not using the new APIs, you can just use the old types for a while. It's not, I don't know, like it's like recommended, but you can do that. And the part that I was focusing on is hydration, because I was working with like canary version of React before for like my framework. I kind of like saw some of this stuff. I was like, oh, that's cool. And now it's like a part of 19. What they do kind of like high level is that when you have a document and you're rendering HTML tag that has a head tag that has like 3 meta tags, and you're rendering body that has like ID equals root, right? What React was doing before is during hydration, it will check that your head tag has just exactly 3 elements. Your body tag has exactly like 1 element or like whatever, right? So like server and client has to be exactly the same. Otherwise you get the hydration error. What they're doing now is that they're checking the first 3 and they're just like ignoring everything that happens after that for like head. And what that means is that if you have like a Chrome extension or some like third-party dependencies like analytics or some stuff like that, they would add a bunch of stuff in the head, like for the script tags and all that stuff, and it's all going to be ignored. You're not going to get a hydration error for that. So that was like the thing that kind of like I cared the most, because I have like some hydration errors in production, as I'm sure Adam likes to like complain about. So this was definitely like one thing. And there's like, again, you don't have to do much. It's just like automatic behavior now. Hydration warnings are like better now, so like it will show you kind of like exactly where in the document or like what exactly is kind of like wrong with like pluses and minuses like in a Git diff. So yeah, so I was kind of like mostly focusing on that and mostly looking at that. So yeah, and that I like that. I don't know if we're allowed to like React in this podcast, but yeah, sorry.
Everyone uses React on this podcast.
Yeah, I use it every day.
Ben, thoughts on 19 or Adam, thoughts? THOTS.
Sorry.
Just wondering thoughts on what he said.
So I don't know. Like one thing that I wonder sometimes with server rendered components and hydration and all that is, I remember a long time ago writing a lot of websites that were doing dynamic things with Ajax, or like literally, and it would just literally make a request, render HTML, pull it down, and just enter HTML equals this thing. And I have to wonder, like, if it's actually faster to do all this JavaScript to do the same thing in some cases. Like sometimes people are literally just going and getting a list of stuff and rendering it. And it's just like, you know, if I just was to render this string in like Go or C or something, and then like plop it out and then be like, oh, I need to dynamically update this list now. And then literally just request it, get the rendered HTML, and then put it on the page and let it parse and render. Like, you know, I'm sure there would be some things like reflowing and jumping around and stuff like that would happen because of what you were doing. But, you know, would it be faster? I'm like, you're not loading a meg of JavaScript and like, you know, parsing it and executing it. Like, I don't know.
I get this.
I like this comment. I can go two ways about this. So first of all, is I'm CEO of HTMX, so like that sounds that sounds exactly like what HTMX is good at. It's basically Ajax and like then insert in HTML. So that's definitely kind of like an approach that's like getting kind of like back getting back in the zeitgeist, and like everyone is like trying this out again. It's actually the way that like kind of like Google thinks about it is like the view transitions, right? So like you already have view transitions again, like support in like Astro or HTMX, where you can say like, hey, if this button is clicked, go get some HTML and just like make like a nice transition to it, right? And Google just on I/O, I think they just announced that like, hey, we're doing the like MPA view transitions so that you will be able to do it with no JavaScript on the client at all. It's going to be it's just like a CSS selector. So you just like marking is like, hey, this is the stuff that can we can like view transition from, and this is the stuff it can view transition to. So zero JavaScript, and just like you click on a button and it looks like SPA, and it does like basically inner HTML. So definitely that whole side of things is happening. Definitely, if you were like begrudging like a Ajax user, like now is the best time to do that. But the other angle is that's the framework that I worked on. It's called Strike. It doesn't mean too much, except that like it's a deprecated HTML element that was deprecated 20 years ago and is still supported in all the browsers. So that one is doing kind of like exactly what you were saying about like, hey, I want to render my HTML in Go, and I want to kind of like just update the page when like something happens. And I was trying to kind of like get this thing working, and I use React Server components to do that. So like the funny thing about React Server components is that they do work a lot like just like inner HTML, right? Like they will diff your stuff when like something new happens, but if it sees that it's a different thing, well, it just like gives up and like inserts the HTML inner HTML, right? So like as long as you send like the new key for every update, it will literally just do inner HTML. But if you don't send the new key, it will kind of like smartly diff everything. It will preserve all the state. It will preserve like client components that you have, so that in Astra world that would be like preserving islands. But like in React, it's just like, yeah, just preserving client component state and preserving like DOM state and all that stuff. So it's like this is literally kind of like that thing, but not in the old way, or even like the quite moderate way. HTMX also allows you to use morph DOM to do this kind of like diffing. So you have this HTML, you have this HTML, and you know how to update like the minimal stuff. So they have this mode, right? I think it's called plugin or extension, but you can do it kind of like this more modern way than just inner HTML. But with React Server components, you can also do like, hey, here's your new ROC like payload. Here's the old like if you're moving between articles, right? Well, that basically means that like there's a new article, just insert this HTML. But if it's like a bit fancier, you can preserve all the state. It's going to be kind of like even kind of like smarter than like morph DOM. Does that kind of like make sense?
That makes sense. It makes sense. I feel like I'm just at a phase in my like career arc where it's like I'm disappointed that like for a while I was really excited. So it was like, oh, I was doing development and there weren't a lot of libraries. And then there was like jQuery, and then there's this explosion of libraries, and then there's frameworks, and it's like, so I was on this upswing of like, oh, this is amazing. Look at all these tools you can use. And now I'm back down on the other side where it's like, all right, I've been doing this for more than 20 years. Why do I still have to use a whole bunch of third-party crap to do this effectively? Like
What's the web? I mean,
what are we even like? Why is this such a thing? Like, I can understand like, okay, I need server software to render some stuff, but like the very fact that if I go out to the average React app and look at it, there's going to be at least 1.5 meg of JavaScript. Like they'll be like, oh no, there's probably a few people that have really optimized it, but like most of the stuff that I've seen, if you just randomly run into a React app in the wild and you check it, you're like, oh my God, I just downloaded 5 megs of stuff for this, shopping cart or whatever. And
Yeah.
I just look at him like, what the, like, what are we even doing? Like, why is this the state of things?
The people who maintain these web specs have decided that we need 20 different web component APIs that nobody wants to use, but we can't have windowing utilities. We can't have a useful component toolkit so that we can have sliders and modals and autocompletes built into the browser. Just off the top of my head. And then there's a long laundry list of other just things that every app needs, but isn't built into the web framework.
I feel like the web spec people are actually I feel like they are trying to move the right way and they are doing a decent job. It's just, it's all driven by industry needs, right? Like it's driven by the needs of like Microsoft and Google and Apple and these companies that are building the browser. So the people that are working on those specs are generally, but they're building like a small piece and then they build another small piece. It's really apparent in style sheets. Actually, you look at the CSS standard and they'll add a small thing, add a small thing, add a small thing. And then all of a sudden they're able to add like, anchor positioning, right? Like something big that people have been asking for a while. And I feel like they're pretty good about that with the web APIs, even if they like it's near misses and stuff like fetch or whatever. But like the JavaScript standards body is a little bit more helter skelter, and I think it's just because they're structured differently, right? Like one is a group of people that work on browsers mostly and have business-driven needs around those things. So whatever. And they also try to do some good while they're at it. And then the other is like a club that any company can buy their way into and say, this is my representative. And it could be someone with like 3 years of experience, right? Like, and they show up and they can veto things and they start designing stuff and nothing that pre-existed is good enough for them. They always invent some new thing. And I say this as someone that's helping with some of these standards right now. Like, I don't think it's maybe as bad now as it used to be, but that was definitely.
Who are you, Ben? Who are you in that? You're the 3-year experience bro that shows up?
No, I'm the guy with 20 years that sits back and shakes his head mostly, but.
You've become like the old grumpy person in the room.
Yeah, I complain and like, well, why don't you get involved? And I'm like, because it's a dead end. I don't want to. But yeah, it's the real thing is you look at the money and there's no one paying for this stuff is the biggest thing. If you got the right people paying for this stuff, things would happen. And
so you just have to get like Netflix or Microsoft or Google or something like that to care about some of the things that Adam listed off.
I think the TC39 probably needs to revise how they manage their membership and actually require interviews and nominations and such. Like, I think that it's a little bit BS that anyone someone at Netflix could just be like, I've only been doing this for a couple of years and I've never designed language ever, but I will be our representative, and they just go, right? Like, that's messed up. That shouldn't happen.
So what's the name? Who's the person they need to fire? I'm taking notes.
Yeah, 3 years experience.
Before we get back to our conversation, we wanted to say thank you to This.Labs, who is the sponsor of today's show. If you need help with a project that has failed to deliver on time, or are in need of a team that feels true ownership over your engineering projects, definitely hit up This.Labs. They specialize in helping business leaders ensure their strategic digital initiatives stay on track. Trusted by companies like PlayStation, Capital One, Herman Miller, PayPal, and T-Mobile, you can find them at this.co. That's THISDOT.co. Now, let's return to our show.
All you need to do is go through, look at who's been on the TC39, when they were on the TC39, and then look at their LinkedIn, and you would know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a thing, and that's not everywhere. There's a lot of really smart, very experienced people that are in this group. It's definitely not the majority of people that are like this, but the fact that can even happen, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And also the other thing is all of these things are operating in silos from these framework groups, which honestly is by design from the framework groups almost more than anything else. Like all of those guys could easily walk into any of these meetings and give their 2 cents, and they just don't. Which again, follow the money. There's
Do you mean
no
framework as
successful,
like React, or what's the framework?
any framework, like any of them. Like there are exactly 0 really successful frameworks that aren't owned by a company.
Well, I think that's by design.
Solid is a
right?
great framework. It's not that successful. Svelte is a great framework. It's not that successful. Like, and what I mean successful is like broad usage, and it is used broadly. Don't get me wrong. I think, well, I could say Vue. Vue is not owned by a company, and they're really successful. But like, I mean, realistically, unless someone's paying people to work on these things, they fail. They don't do very well. Like, there's no way around it. Like RxJS is such a small utility library that it can live with no one paying someone to work on it. But like the framework, no way, not a chance. And like, so these people are paid and they work, fairly long hours to get this stuff done, and they don't have time to go into these message body or these TC39 type bodies and whatever and participate. Not to mention that the processes involved in those things are kind of mysterious, not well publicized. And a lot of it happens behind the scenes in like private discords and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, like it all is by design for all, like the web platform is what it is, not just because of the standards bodies, but because of everyone involved, right down to Adam Rackis. Like no one's doing what they could to fix it. Everyone's either complaining or building their own thing and ignoring everybody else.
Raise your hand, Ben. Sitting here complaining. But sorry, go ahead, Adam.
I was gonna say, you said like these standards bodies, you have to be sponsored by a company, and I've said for years that like the rich desktop application, like the financial dashboards that you build or analytics dashboards, there's no big tech company that's heavily invested in that. You've got Google and Amazon and Netflix, and if they're sponsoring these standards bodies, I think that's a big part of the reason why you don't see things like rich component toolkits being shipped into the web, or windowing, or something like RxJS getting built in, although that observables are now finally slowly but surely coming, maybe. I think that's a big part of the problem.
Yeah, my thing about like frameworks not participating is that like they don't want to, right? So like there was a thing like I don't remember, like 5-8 years ago, where everyone's like, oh, can we just build React into a browser because like VDOM is the best thing ever and nothing will ever be kind of like improved upon it. We should just like standardize on it and like push it in the browser. And the React team was the first one to say like, please don't do that. We don't want that, right? Because they don't want for this thing to die in the standard. They want kind of like to launch a new version, like now with hooks. They want to launch a new version now with React Server Components and so on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of React Server Components, so Adam, I feel like I remember some sort of like tweet that you had a while ago saying like, God, what was it? You're basically saying stop complaining about, and I don't know, maybe it was React, maybe it was Next, maybe it was something else, because you just don't have enough experience as a developer. Like, what were you? Was it Next, or was it React, or was it like React Server Components?
I don't know. If you told me ahead of time, we could have maybe tracked it down.
I know.
I'm not sure.
But like, if we just take React Server Components as the topic, like why do people hate it so much?
I think I think a lot of people are working on simpler things where maybe they don't need it and they're kind of lazy and they don't want to learn something new. And so,
but okay, so let's go to this like lazy and not learning something. Like, what are they not learning? Like, what are they missing?
Well, RSC makes you think about servers now. So typically, like in the early React days with SPAs, your whole server would just send down an empty HTML page, and then all your scripts would run, and then the whole thing would live in your browser, and you could send a fetch to some URL to get data. And it was pretty simple to reason about. There are deep performance problems with that. No data are ever requested until the app runs on the browser. And RSC tries to improve that by letting you request data sooner on the server and stream them in to the browser. For a lot of apps, that doesn't really matter. And so a lot of apps don't need that. And instead of just ignoring it and keep on doing what they're already doing, which they could, they just complain and they bash it and they say, this is stupid. Why is web dev like this? It's just dumb.
Because they're using React Server components and they don't need it, or because they're using React. Okay, so they're using React Server components and they don't.
Or even they're thinking about it when they don't need to use it. They're not using it. They're just like angry that it exists and other people are talking about it rather than just ignoring it and doing their jobs the same way that they have, which is fine. There's lots and lots of things that are fine as client rendered SPAs.
I mean, I love to use, like, 'cause I build a lot of demo apps, right? And so whenever I'm building a demo app, I hate it when somebody's like, yeah, you could do it that way because this is just a demo app. I'm like, no, give me what it, like, let's talk about what it looks like if you're using this app in production. Like, let's not dumb down, like a POC or demo app or whatever, because that makes it less interesting.
Yeah,
but
you're
like,
right.
but like, yeah, you should have seen what Ben has done to this little app we built, like WebSockets, because everybody needs to use WebSockets like today, no matter what. But anyways, so like, but like, I still want to get down to the meat of what is it that they're not understanding about React Server components. Like, if they need React Server components, what are they missing? Like, why is it so difficult for people?
Well, I mean, we risk being very, very mean to a lot of people if we say, why is it so hard for them? Skill issue would be the tart way of putting it.
But what about it though? Like, if I was like, Adam, I need to do React Server components and I don't know how, I don't have the skill. What are you going to teach me? Like, what are you going to, like, how do I get that knowledge that you're talking about that's going to get me over that?
I have like a counter argument. Well,
Okay.
I'm not sure what I'm trying to say here, but like, why didn't people update from Angular 1 to Angular like JS or the other way around? I don't remember names, but like, why didn't they want to update from 1 to 2? Like 2 was clearly better, otherwise they wouldn't do it. But like everyone is like, no, we are not doing it, right? So it's like,
this is a new paradigm, right? It's like
well,
a paradigm
it's just if you're working on something and what you hear is like, well, you need to do more work, like the easiest way out is like, well, I'm not doing more work, right? And like that's like funny for me to in frameworks is that like React Server components showed up, right? And the answer was, if you're like a Vue developer, is like, well, we don't need it. Like if we needed that would have been there in Nuxt or like in Vue, right? Like we don't need that. And then like the next iteration on that is like, we have the same thing at home, and there will be like just a thing that like kind of looks like that, but like doesn't do anything like closely like resembling that. And it's like, yeah, we can just use that instead. Like that's better because that's like our thing, right? And then there will be like 5 years later, they will add a real thing, and they will be, yeah, that's a standard. Everyone has to have it, right? So like that's just a standard way that was happening with like everything, right? The same way as like hooks were showing up. We don't need that. Like we already have this best way of writing everything, and then every framework added hooks, right? It's like I think it's just naturally just like a standard. It's just, well, that's just how it is. And with React Server components, like the one that I kind of like remember was streaming, right? Because streaming was there. Like I used streaming in like 2010 in PHP, and that was like fine. Like that was like a okay thing to do, but everyone kind of like forgot about it except for Marco, right? In JavaScript land. And then when it was kind of like reintroduced, everyone was like, why would you need streaming? That's bad, that's more complicated. Why do I need to think about it? Why do I need to add it? And then everyone adds support to streaming, and it's like, your framework doesn't have streaming? Like, what are you like? So I think it's just natural and
natural evolution of things.
Well, because it's like, how would you know that you need something that you miss? Like I remember when people were saying like, you don't need iPhone. There's like a perfectly fine like a Bakelite at home, right? So it's like,
I remember when people in React were saying you don't need like not, and it wasn't like, I don't want to say best practices, but like, you don't need like, because in Angular land, in Vue land, right? Like you kind of look up to somebody and you're like, hey, this is the best practice for X. But then in React, it's like you can do anything on your own. It's just a library, And then like what happens? Okay, well, next in Vercel show up. Hi, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, well, the recommended way to like use React now is this, what some odd five some odd years later. So
yeah, and
you're
I would
right.
say it's not the whole thing, right? So like there are like some things that are becoming recommended ways, right? So like even Next.js doesn't do everything if you're comparing to like a Laravel, right? Like it doesn't have like an active record or like stuff like that, right? It's like they are saying like, yes, like if you're using an image, you should be using like image tag because like Google paid us at the whatever like the project is called, right? So like it's not everything is going to become the standard. Not everything is going to become the feature.
What do you think, Adam?
I mean, I agree with all of that. I think comparing it to hooks is enlightening here. The opposition to hooks didn't last long because hooks have very clear benefit. Like you can take, and people did this in talks. They took big old school React code and they converted it to hooks, and it was like a small fraction of the size. And hooks are fairly simple to learn. There's a few little rules. RSC just requires a huge change in thinking, and you have to think about a lot more things than you did before. You have to think about things like server waterfalls, structuring your componentry in a certain way so that you don't create them. There's a whole long list of rules that RSCs follow. You can't do anything on the browser, no state. You can't have any kind of event handlers, and so then, but they can render client components. It's just a lot more to think about, and the benefits just aren't there for a lot of types of apps, depending on what you're building. A client SPA is 100% fine for lots and lots of things out there.
I want to use RSC in everything I do, but I love that. So you're basically like it's like rock climbing. You're doing like a V10 versus most people want to stay at like V0, V2s, V3s, or whatever.
Something like that.
Are we like in tech? So I had to throw out like a rock climb. Anybody else rock climb? No.
I do not.
Oh gosh, wow. Yeah, hi. Well, I don't anymore. I used to though. Which, by the way, if you want to meet people in the Bay Area in tech, just go rock climbing. I promise they're there. Like everybody's there rock climbing. Okay, cool. Well, I mean, I love that explanation, Adam, and I plan on, for those of y'all listening, this dot is planning on rolling out a bunch of RC content. So actually, Adam, maybe we should just have you on to come chat about it or show us or whatever. I don't know, but
that could be fun.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty invested in the conversations that are happening and trying to help educate people, because I think education is actually the problem we're experiencing. It's not really like, oh, this sucks. It's like, I'm so sick of hearing that it sucks. So get ready, y'all. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. Well, thanks everyone for listening. You can follow Yaroslav/JLarky on Twitter at JLarky, Adam again at Adam Rackis, Ben again at Ben Lesh, myself at Lady Leet. And thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Sometimes it's hard to bridge the gap between business objectives and tech implementation, and it can get messy. This dot is trusted by top names like Meta, Google, and T-Mobile, and they love helping business leaders fulfill their strategic digital initiatives. Check them out at thisdot.co. One more time, that's THISDOT.co.